It all started in my tiny apartment, right after my second failed business attempt. I had just turned 28, and I was scraping the bottom of my savings account, trying to figure out what went wrong this time. The first business was a small tech startup that flopped because of poor market research. The second was an e-commerce website for fitness equipment that I overcomplicated. The products were great, but I didn't have the experience to handle marketing, logistics, or customer service. After both failures, I felt like a total failure myself. I had invested so much time, energy, and money, only to end up back where I started. I remember one particularly rough night sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the screen of my laptop, trying to figure out what I could do next. I had already borrowed money from family and friends for these failed ventures. The pressure was suffocating. But as I scrolled through social media in a haze of frustration, I stumbled across a post from an entrepreneur I followed. It was a motivational quote that said, "If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough." For some reason, that quote struck a chord with me. It was like a small flicker of hope lit up inside of me. At that moment, I decided to do something different. I wasn't going to give up, but I was going to go back to basics. I realized I had been trying to scale too fast without understanding the fundamentals. I decided that my next venture would be something simple, something that I could control with minimal overhead. The idea hit me the next day when I was walking through a local farmer's market. There were all these amazing handmade goods, artisanal foods, jewelry, clothing, but I noticed a trend. A lot of the vendors had minimal branding. Their booths were thrown together at the last minute, and their products had no consistent look or feel. As I walked through the market, I realized there was a huge gap in the market for well-branded, high-quality, handmade goods with a professional appearance. I thought, why not create a platform to help these small artisans sell their goods online, with a focus on branding and marketing? I spent the next few weeks researching the market. I looked at Etsy, Shopify, and other similar platforms, but none of them offered the level of branding support that I envisioned. That was my opportunity. I could create an e-commerce platform that not only helped small businesses sell their products, but also gave them the tools they needed to create professional, standout brands. But there was one major issue. I didn't have the funds to hire a team of developers, and I certainly didn't have the money to invest in expensive software. So I did what I always do when I'm in a pinch. I learned. I started reading about web development and design, even taking free courses on platforms like Coursera and Udemy. I spent hours teaching myself how to build a website. I didn't want to just hire someone. I wanted to understand the process myself, so I could build my own vision from the ground up. It took me about 3 months of late nights and weekends, but I finally built a basic prototype of the platform. I called it Artisan Link, a place where artisans could showcase their products and gain access to professional branding tools like logo creation, marketing templates, and a community of like-minded creators. The first few months were incredibly difficult. I had no investors, no business partners, and barely enough money to cover my expenses. But I kept working on the platform and started reaching out to artisans at local markets and through social media. To my surprise, a few of them were intrigued by the idea. They were tired of fighting to stand out in a saturated market and loved the idea of having a professional platform tailored specifically to their needs. By the end of the first year, I had 50 artisans using the platform. I was running the entire operation on my own, doing customer support, coding, and handling marketing. It was exhausting, but I could feel something building. The feedback from the artisans was overwhelmingly positive. They appreciated the easy-to-use tools and the sense of community that came with being part of Artisan Link. The next big break came when one of the artisans I had worked with, an owner of a small pottery business, shared her success story on social media. She had made her first $10,000 in sales in just 3 months using the platform, and it went viral. Orders started flooding in from all over the country, and Artisan Link began gaining traction. That was when I realized the potential of what I had built. By the second year, I was able to hire a small team of developers, a marketing specialist, and a customer support representative. We expanded the platform to include more features, like a built-in payment processor and advanced marketing tools. The more artisans joined, the more feedback we received, and the better the platform became. Our user base grew exponentially, and by year 3, Artisan Link was generating a steady stream of revenue. But even with all the success, I never lost sight of the lessons from my previous failures. I kept my overhead low, reinvested in the business, and never expanded too quickly. I focused on maintaining strong relationships with the artisans who had helped me get to where I was. I also made sure that Artisan Link remained a platform where small businesses could thrive, rather than becoming a corporate machine that only cared about profits. By the time Artisan Link hit its 5th anniversary, we had over 5,000 artisans using the platform, and we were featured in major publications like Forbes and Business Insider. I had gone from struggling with debt and failure to running a successful, profitable business that was helping thousands of small entrepreneurs succeed. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far I've come. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I thought about quitting. But I'm proud of what I built because it wasn't just about the money. It was about helping others achieve their dreams. Now, Artisan Link is more than just an e-commerce platform. It's a community, a place where small business owners can get the support they need to grow and succeed. As I sit in my office today, looking out over the city, I still can't believe how far I've come. It's been a long, hard road, but I wouldn't change a thing. If there's one lesson I've learned along the way, it's that failure isn't the end. It's just part of the journey. And sometimes, the greatest successes come from the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I was 25 when I first realized that working a 9-to-5 job wasn't going to be enough for me. I grew up in a middle-class family where hard work and job stability were the key themes. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked as a school teacher. They taught me the value of a steady income and the importance of responsibility. But for some reason, I always felt like I was meant for something more. I graduated from college with a degree in business management, and after a few months of job hunting, I landed a position as a marketing assistant at a relatively small startup. At first, it was everything I wanted: fast-paced, innovative, and full of opportunities to learn. But soon, the excitement wore off. I realized I was just another cog in a giant wheel, doing tasks that felt repetitive and uninspiring. My bosses were nice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to do something bigger, something of my own. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I came across a post from an entrepreneur I followed. They were talking about the importance of creating a side hustle, something you could build alongside your full-time job until it gained enough traction to go full-time. This idea hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd always been interested in photography and had even dabbled in it as a hobby, but I'd never seriously thought of it as a business. I started thinking about how many people would pay for high-quality photos, whether it was for events, businesses needing marketing materials, or even family portraits. I decided to start small. I bought a decent camera, learned everything I could about lighting, editing, and composition, and set up a basic website showcasing my portfolio. I had no expectations, but it was my first step towards something bigger. The first few months were a struggle. I was working full-time during the day and hustling at night to build my photography business. I spent countless hours tweaking my website, reaching out to potential clients, and learning how to market myself on social media. At first, I was only getting small gigs, friends' weddings, birthday parties, and the occasional real estate shoot. But every job, no matter how small, was a learning opportunity. My biggest breakthrough came when a local restaurant reached out to me. They were launching a new menu and wanted professional photos to highlight their dishes. I was nervous as heck, but I took the job. The shoot went well, and they were thrilled with the final product. I had no idea at the time, but that project would turn into a series of gigs with local businesses looking for professional photos to advertise their products. Word of mouth started to spread, and my portfolio began to grow. By the time I hit my 1-year mark in business, I was starting to make enough money to justify cutting down on my full-time hours. I went from working 50 hours a week to about 40, then 30, and eventually, I quit my job altogether. It was terrifying, leaving the stability of a steady paycheck, but I felt a sense of freedom I had never experienced before. Over the next few years, my business continued to grow. I specialized in food and lifestyle photography, and as my reputation spread, I was able to increase my rates. I was now working with high-end clients, including boutique hotels, luxury restaurants, and even a few national brands. I hired an assistant to help with editing, a marketing manager to handle the growing demand for my work, and I started to delegate more of the administrative tasks that had once consumed my time. I no longer had to worry about chasing down clients or keeping up with every single detail. I had built a team to help scale my business. But even with all the success, I felt like something was missing. It wasn't until I took a trip to Bali that I truly understood what I wanted next. While there, I met a few other entrepreneurs who had started businesses with a social impact focus. They were using their companies to provide clean water to villages in Africa, supporting sustainable fashion, and helping to protect the environment. I realized that I had the resources and the platform to do something similar. Upon returning home, I decided to give back in a way that aligned with my business. I launched a nonprofit arm of my photography business, where a portion of every project fee went towards supporting initiatives like youth arts programs, environmental conservation, and animal rescue organizations. I wasn't sure how it would be received at first, but it was one of the most fulfilling decisions I had ever made. Clients loved the idea of supporting causes while getting high-quality photos, and it gave my work even more purpose. Now, 5 years after quitting my job and going full-time with my business, I'm running a successful company with multiple revenue streams. I have a steady flow of clients, a loyal team, and a growing nonprofit initiative. What started as a side hustle is now a full-blown business, and I'm doing work that I love on my terms. But the journey hasn't been easy. There were days when I wanted to quit, moments of doubt, and failures that set me back. But the key was persistence. I learned that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, effort, and the willingness to learn from every failure. Looking back, I realized that quitting my stable job was one of the best decisions I ever made. It wasn't the easiest path, but it was the one that led me to where I am today. If you're sitting at a desk, feeling like you're meant for something more, I encourage you to take that first step. Whether it's a side hustle or a completely new career, it's worth the risk. You never know where it might take you. It's not just about building a business for profit. It's about building something meaningful, something that aligns with who you are and what you believe in. The hustle will always be there, but so will the rewards. Just remember, it all starts with one small step, and from there, it's about trusting the process and staying focused on the long-term vision. Now, I get messages from people asking how I got started and if they can do the same. And every time, I tell them, it's all about taking that leap of faith. The rest will follow if you're willing to put in the work. I'm living proof that with enough passion, persistence, and a little bit of courage, you can turn your dreams into reality. I'll never forget the moment I realized I had stumbled upon something huge. I was broke, living in a small one-bedroom apartment, struggling to pay the rent. I had no plan, no direction, and no real idea of what I wanted out of life. I was just going through the motions, taking random odd jobs, and hoping something would click. But that one phone call changed everything. It started when I got an email from a local business incubator. They were offering a free workshop on entrepreneurship, aimed at helping people like me turn their ideas into real businesses. I figured it couldn't hurt to go, at least it might look good on my resume. So I went, with zero expectations. The workshop was a whirlwind of business jargon, presentations, and networking. Honestly, I didn't understand half of what was being said, but something in me started to wake up. As I sat there, listening to the guest speaker talk about building a product that solves a problem and creating value for customers, a light bulb went off in my head. I had always been obsessed with gadgets, especially in the tech space. I spent hours each week researching new gadgets, reading reviews, and watching unboxing videos. That's when it hit me. Why not create a platform where tech enthusiasts like me could discover and discuss the latest gadgets, but with a twist? A place that not only gave honest reviews, but also let users actively engage in the development of the products they loved. A sort of crowdsourced gadget lab. I had no experience in tech or product development, but the idea seemed so obvious to me. People love talking about new technology. Why not let them help shape the future of gadgets while also giving them a space to connect with others who shared their passion? After the workshop, I couldn't shake the idea. I spent the next few days researching, gathering data, and mapping out a plan. I talked to a few friends who were in the tech industry, asking for their advice and insights. The feedback was positive, but I could tell no one thought it would be possible. They were all too busy with their own ventures, and frankly, so was I. I didn't have the capital to launch a platform. I didn't have the technical expertise to build it, and I definitely didn't have a network of investors or influencers. I was starting to feel overwhelmed, but I knew deep down that if I didn't try, I'd always regret it. One of the things I learned early on was that you don't need to have everything figured out to get started. You just need to take that first step and figure the rest out along the way. So, I decided to launch a simple website. It wasn't much, just a landing page with a basic description of what I envisioned. I figured I'd see if there was any interest before I sunk more time and money into the idea. I created a small crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter to raise the funds I needed to get started. At first, I didn't get much traction. I didn't have a huge social media following, and I didn't have any big-name endorsements. But I kept pushing, reaching out to influencers, posting on forums, and promoting the campaign through every channel I could think of. Slowly but surely, people started taking notice. Some small tech blogs covered the story. I got a few mentions on Twitter. And then, after a couple of months, the campaign hit its goal. With the funds in hand, I began building the platform. It was a steep learning curve. I had to teach myself how to design a website, how to code, and how to navigate the world of tech startups. Every day, I felt like I was hitting a wall, but I kept going. I hired a small development team to help me with the more technical aspects, and I started putting together a content strategy. I knew the key to success would be to build a community around the platform and engage users in ways that hadn't been done before. The website was up and running, and slowly, people started signing up. At first, it was just a handful of curious users. But as I continued to improve the platform and add more features, the community began to grow. I reached out to gadget manufacturers, asking them to showcase their products on the site. Some were skeptical, but others were intrigued by the idea. A few agreed to collaborate, and soon, I had exclusive reviews, unboxings, and even sneak peeks at upcoming products that no one else had. The feedback from the community was incredible. People loved the idea of having a space where they could talk about gadgets in depth, share their own experiences, and even provide feedback on new products before they hit the market. The tech enthusiasts were engaged and excited, and manufacturers began to take notice as well. A year in, things started to snowball. The platform was generating enough traffic to attract advertisers, and my little website became a trusted hub for tech news and reviews. I had finally started to see the fruits of my labor, but the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were constant technical issues, late-night meetings with my team, and moments where I seriously questioned if it was all worth it. There were plenty of days when I felt like giving up, but I pushed through. As the business continued to grow, I expanded the team. I brought in content creators, social media managers, and even a few product designers to help develop exclusive tech gadgets under the brand. I didn't stop there. I started attending tech conferences and building relationships with industry leaders. Slowly, the business began to gain real credibility. 2 years after the initial launch, I found myself speaking at a major tech conference, sharing the stage with some of the biggest names in the industry. It was surreal. I had gone from being a guy with no money and no connections to building a brand that was making waves in the tech world. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were so many moments where I felt like everything was falling apart, where I had to make tough decisions and face failure head-on. But those failures became the foundation of my success. Without those challenges, I wouldn't have learned the lessons that ultimately led to the growth of my company. It's been 5 years since I started this journey, and now I'm not only the CEO of a thriving tech platform, but I also have a seat at the table with investors, manufacturers, and influencers. But even more than that, I've built a community of people who are just as passionate about technology as I am. And that's the most rewarding part of it all. If I could give advice to anyone starting out, it would be this: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect time to start. You'll never have all the answers. Just take the first step, even if it's a small one. Learn as you go, embrace the challenges, and trust that if you keep going, you'll figure it out. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. If I can do it, so can you. I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I was just a regular guy with a 9-to-5 job that paid the bills. I had a steady paycheck, a little savings account, and a life that, while not glamorous, was comfortable. But if you asked me back then if I thought I'd own a business one day, I would have laughed. I wasn't that kind of person, or so I thought. It all started with a problem that many people experience: frustration with my job. I worked at a mid-tier marketing agency, and while it wasn't a terrible job, I could sense that something was missing. The work felt monotonous, the pay wasn't anything to write home about, and my boss? Well, let's just say he wasn't exactly an inspiration. I was coming home from work every day feeling drained, as if the energy had been sucked out of me. One day, I found myself scrolling through Reddit during my lunch break, mindlessly browsing through random threads. I came across a post where someone mentioned how they had left their 9-to-5 job to start their own business. They spoke about the highs and lows, the fears, and the incredible satisfaction of being their own boss. Something about it clicked with me. It wasn't just a random post. It felt like a wake-up call. I had always dreamed of working on my own terms, but I'd never taken the first step. At that point, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I didn't have a grand business idea or a product that was going to change the world, but I knew I had to try. The idea of working for myself, of not answering to anyone, of waking up in the morning excited to work, that was the dream. I started small. I took an online course on digital marketing, something I could leverage from my background in marketing. I didn't want to take too much risk, so I spent my evenings after work learning about SEO, content creation, and social media marketing. I was determined to figure it out, even if it meant long nights and weekends. About 6 months in, I had learned enough to feel confident enough to start offering freelance marketing services. I started by reaching out to small businesses and local startups, offering my help with their online presence. The first client I landed was a local coffee shop that needed help getting more customers through their doors. I spent hours crafting their social media content, setting up Google Ads campaigns, and optimizing their website for local searches. The results were immediate. Within a couple of weeks, their foot traffic had increased by 30%, and their sales were up. That was the moment when I realized I was onto something. But even with that success, I wasn't ready to quit my job just yet. The leap from a steady paycheck to full-time entrepreneurship was terrifying. I kept working at my agency while building up my side hustle. It was exhausting, no doubt. I'd wake up early, work on client projects before my 9-to-5 job, then come home and work some more after hours. It felt like there weren't enough hours in the day. But there was one thing that kept me going. I could see the potential. I could feel the difference between the work I was doing for myself and the work I was doing for someone else. The passion I had for my side business was something I'd never felt in my day job. As I gained more clients and built a reputation, things started to snowball. More referrals came in, and soon enough, I had a steady stream of clients, which was a good problem to have. But I had to make a tough decision: stick with the security of my job or take the plunge and go all in on my business. The thought of leaving a stable income was scary, but I knew if I didn't take the leap now, I'd always wonder what if. In the end, it was a conversation with my girlfriend that gave me the courage to quit. She could see how unhappy I was in my job, and after listening to me talk about my business plans for the umpteenth time, she said, "You've got this. You've been building something. It's time." That was it. I handed in my resignation and went full-time with my business. The transition wasn't easy. I was suddenly in charge of everything, not just client work, but also accounting, marketing, and sales. The first few months were brutal. I had no safety net, no more guaranteed paycheck. There were weeks when I had to take on projects just to cover bills, even if they weren't ideal clients. But as time went on, I started to get more strategic about my work. I raised my rates, set boundaries, and began to focus on attracting clients that I actually enjoyed working with. Within the first year of running my business full-time, I doubled my income compared to what I had been making at my job. It wasn't easy, but it was incredibly rewarding. I finally felt like I was in control of my destiny. I was making decisions based on what was best for me, not just what I thought my boss wanted. I was learning on the fly, adapting to challenges, and getting better every day. But the real turning point came when I realized that I couldn't do everything myself. At first, I was a one-man show, handling all the work, all the clients, all the marketing. But as my business grew, I reached a point where I was burning out. I had to hire a small team to help with the workload. The first hire was a part-time assistant to help with administrative tasks. It was a leap of faith, but it paid off. I was able to focus on what I did best, while she took care of the logistics. Gradually, I expanded my team, bringing in other marketers, content creators, and even a graphic designer. Building a team of talented people was one of the best decisions I made. As the business grew, so did my confidence. I went from being a solo entrepreneur hustling in the evenings to running a small but thriving business. I was able to invest in tools that made my work more efficient, hire a business coach to help me scale, and even travel for inspiration. My mornings were no longer filled with dread. Instead, I woke up excited, ready to face the challenges that came with running my own company. Fast forward a few years, and I now have a team of 12 employees and a steady stream of high-value clients. My business is generating more revenue than I ever thought possible, and I can't help but feel grateful for the leap of faith I took all those years ago. There are still tough days. The work never stops, and there's always something new to learn, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Looking back, I realized that the turning point wasn't about having a groundbreaking idea or a unique product. It was about taking action. It was about recognizing that I didn't have to settle for a life I didn't love. I took the risk, and it paid off. It wasn't an easy road, but it's been the most rewarding journey of my life. And now, I get to wake up every day doing what I love and helping others achieve the same. I never imagined I would become an entrepreneur. I grew up in a small town, in a family where the idea of owning a business seemed like something reserved for other people, not for us. My parents worked hard, my dad as a mechanic and my mom as a nurse, and although we weren't rich by any means, we had enough to get by. The concept of wealth and success was a distant idea that I assumed belonged only to those who had money to start with. That was until I made a decision in my late 20s that changed my life forever. At that point, I was working a 9-to-5 job at a marketing firm, and to be honest, I wasn't happy. The work was dull, the clients were demanding, and I was barely scraping by. It wasn't that I hated the job, but I knew deep down that it wasn't what I was meant to do. I wasn't living for anything, I was just existing. It all began one night when I was scrolling through social media after another exhausting day at work. I stumbled across an ad for an online course about building a business from scratch. At first, I laughed it off. I wasn't one of those people who could just jump into something new and succeed. I didn't have capital, connections, or experience. I had no idea what I was doing. But there was something about that ad, something in the way it spoke to me, that made me click. After signing up for the course, I felt both excited and terrified. I remember sitting down at my kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of me, ready to dive in. The first lesson taught me something I hadn't considered before, that successful businesses aren't built on just having a great product. They're built on solving problems. The idea hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been looking for the next big idea, the next tech breakthrough, but I hadn't been focusing on real-world problems. What was I doing? I had been waiting for a big break instead of asking myself, what can I solve? I spent the next few weeks brainstorming. I was determined to find something I could build that would actually help people. After a lot of trial and error, I came up with a simple idea, an online platform to help small businesses automate their marketing. I knew from my time at the marketing firm that small businesses often struggled with marketing because they didn't have the resources or knowledge. I could create a platform that would allow them to schedule posts, track engagement, and manage campaigns all from one place. The next step was to get it off the ground. I had no tech skills, no experience in building websites, and definitely no money to hire anyone to do it for me. But I was determined, and I did what any resourceful person would do. I started Googling. I spent countless hours reading about website development, coding languages, and how to create a simple but functional MVP, minimum viable product. I spent the next few months working late nights and weekends, building the platform from the ground up. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. It had the basic features I needed to get started. And when it was finally ready, I launched it with zero fanfare. I didn't have a big marketing budget, and I didn't have a team to back me up. I just had a website and a dream. The first few weeks were tough. I got very few signups. I realized that building the platform was only half the battle. I needed to find users who would actually pay for the service. So, I reached out to a few small business owners I knew from my old job and offered them a free trial in exchange for feedback. To my surprise, several of them agreed. They found the platform useful, but they also pointed out several areas for improvement. This feedback was invaluable, and I spent the next few months tweaking the platform, adding new features, and fixing bugs. It was exhausting. But slowly, word began to spread. More people started signing up, and eventually, I had my first paying customer. I remember the moment clearly. It was a small business in my town that had been using the platform for a few months and finally decided to pay for the full version. It felt surreal. I had created something that people actually valued enough to pay for. I knew this was only the beginning. I couldn't rely on a few customers from my hometown forever. I needed to scale, and fast. I turned to social media to promote the platform. At first, I posted in every small business group I could find, offering free trials and discounts. But it wasn't until I invested in some basic paid advertising that things started to really take off. The signups began pouring in. I still remember the first time I saw a spike in activity a steady stream of customers coming through the website. It felt like a dream. However, scaling a business wasn't without its challenges. As the customer base grew, so did the technical issues. My platform went down a few times, which caused me to lose some customers. I had to learn fast about server management and customer support. At one point, I thought about giving up. The stress was overwhelming, and there were days when I didn't think I could keep going. But I kept reminding myself why I started in the first place, to solve problems for small businesses. By the time I reached my third year in business, things had really started to snowball. The platform had evolved, and I was making more money than I ever thought possible. I hired my first employee, a developer who could help me scale the technical side of things, and we began to build a team. Looking back, the journey to entrepreneurship wasn't smooth, and it certainly wasn't quick. It took years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices. But in the end, it was all worth it. My platform now serves thousands of small businesses around the world. And while the road wasn't easy, I learned one important lesson. Entrepreneurship isn't about having everything figured out from the start. It's about finding a problem to solve and being willing to do whatever it takes to make it work. Today, I still get those late-night moments when I think back to where I started. From being stuck in a dead-end job to running a successful business, I can honestly say I never imagined this life for myself. But it's mine now. And it all started with a simple decision to take a chance. I never set out to be an entrepreneur. Honestly, I was just trying to avoid moving back in with my parents. It started in 2019, right after I lost my job at a mid-sized marketing agency. I was 28, newly single, living in Chicago, and completely out of savings. The job loss wasn't even dramatic, no layoffs or angry scenes, just a quiet realization that the agency wasn't growing and my role had become redundant. With rent 2 weeks away and zero prospects, I grabbed gigs anywhere I could, delivering food, copywriting on Fiverr, selling old clothes on Poshmark. It was chaos, but somewhere in that mess, I stumbled into the one thing that changed everything: dog treats. My roommate at the time, Kayla, baked a batch of homemade pumpkin peanut butter treats for her pit bull, Milo. She left a few out on the kitchen counter. I didn't know they were for dogs. I ate one, and I liked it. When she told me they were pet snacks, I didn't believe her until she showed me the recipe. That night, we joked about starting a gourmet dog treat brand. But the next morning, she sent me a link to a farmer's market vendor application and said, "I filled this out for us. It's in 3 weeks. Don't flake." We baked 200 bags of treats under the name Milo's Munchies. We used resealable coffee bags and hand-stamped the logo with a rubber stamp from Etsy. We didn't even know about commercial licenses for food production or health codes. We just showed up. We sold out in 4 hours. Turns out, Chicago's pet owners are obsessed with healthy ingredients, and our story, 2 broke millennials baking for their rescue pup, hit the sweet spot. We even had people asking if they could invest. It was wild. The next week, we got serious. We found a shared commercial kitchen and learned we needed insurance, labeling compliance, and, yes, a business license. Kayla handled production and recipes. I did branding, sales, and online marketing. We built a Shopify store with $29 and a YouTube tutorial. Orders trickled in. Then we posted a TikTok showing Milo dancing while we baked treats. It hit 1.2 million views in 2 days. By December, we were getting 150 orders a day. We couldn't keep up. Kayla quit her job. I maxed out a credit card to buy packaging in bulk. We moved into a tiny warehouse with a walk-in oven and hired 3 part-timers. The dream was becoming real. Then came the disaster. In early 2020, just before the pandemic, we signed a deal with a regional pet store chain. They wanted us in 60 stores. We thought this was our big break. We overextended ourselves completely: production, inventory, shipping, all ramped up for this one order. They canceled 2 weeks later. Corporate restructuring, they said. We were sitting on $40,000 worth of treats with a 4-month shelf life and no backup plan. To make things worse, COVID hit. Farmers markets shut down. Retailers closed. Our warehouse lease was up for renewal. We almost folded right there. But 2 things saved us. First, DTC. With everyone stuck at home and adopting dogs, we doubled down on e-commerce. I learned Facebook ads in 2 weeks, burned $800 testing terrible creatives, and finally cracked a winning combo: cute dogs, clean ingredients, and a 10-second clip of someone biting the treat. Yes, a human. Second, subscription boxes. We introduced a monthly plan, new flavors, exclusive toys, surprise items. Our LTV went from $19 to $87. We pushed the treat your dog like family angle hard, and it worked. By summer 2021, we had over 10,000 subscribers. I'll never forget the day we hit $100K in monthly recurring revenue. Kayla cried. I just stared at the striped dashboard like it was lying to me. We reinvested every dollar. Scaled the team to 14. Outsourced baking to a certified co-packer. Bought real branding from an agency in Portland. Our packaging started showing up in top pet products lists. We were becoming a real company. In 2022, we rebranded from Milo's Munchies to Wild Fang Pet Company. The new look was sleek, earthy, and screamed premium. Sales tripled. But it wasn't smooth sailing. Our first co-packer missed deadlines. One month we had 4,000 unfulfilled orders. We spent Christmas refunding angry customers and offering $20 gift cards just to stop the bleeding. We switched vendors and started working with a supply chain consultant. I didn't even know that was a job. It changed everything. By 2023, Wild Fang was in over 400 independent pet stores and 3 boutique chains. We launched a grain-free line, CBD treats, which brought their own legal headaches, and even a limited edition birthday cake kit for dogs. And then the calls started. First, an acquisition offer from a pet food conglomerate. We weren't ready. Then, a partnership pitch from a celebrity-backed pet wellness brand. They had the audience. We had the product. We signed a deal, launched a co-branded line, and hit $1 million in monthly revenue by December. I now lead a 32-person team. We have office dogs, quarterly offsites, and our own line of organic jerky. I wear hoodies to investor meetings. I'm still learning every single day. The craziest part? Kayla left last year. Not because of a fight, she just realized her dream was baking, not running a company. She moved to Oregon and opened a dog-friendly cafe. We still talk all the time. People ask me what the secret was. Honestly, it was never the product. It was showing up, even when we had no clue what we were doing. It was adapting so fast our heads spun. It was learning from our customers, not investors. I started because I was broke. I kept going because I couldn't imagine going back. And today, I still bite every treat before we ship it. Just in case. I never intended to become an entrepreneur. I just wanted to sleep. It was 2018, and I was 6 months into my first real 9 to 5 job, working as a junior account manager at a mid-sized digital marketing agency. My boss was the kind of guy who ended every email with "circle back," and once praised a colleague for being efficiently invisible. The work wasn't bad, but the sleep was. I lived in a loud part of Chicago, above a 24-hour diner where the drunk yelling outside didn't stop until the sun came up. I tried everything: white noise machines, blackout curtains, melatonin, noise-canceling headphones. Nothing worked. One night at 2 a.m., after my upstairs neighbor dropped something heavy on the floor for the 6th time, I gave up. I opened my laptop and typed into Google, "how to make a soundproof sleeping pod." That search changed my life. I went deep. Forums, academic papers, patent databases. I found that soundproof booths existed, mostly for musicians or podcasters. But no one had made one that was compact, affordable, and designed purely for sleeping. I mocked up an idea using SketchUp, a modular pod made from sound-absorbing panels, ventilation fans, a memory foam mattress, and soft LED lighting. I didn't have the money or engineering skills to build it properly, but I posted my concept on Reddit /sleep /DIY /entrepreneur with the title, "Would you sleep in this?" The post blew up. People weren't just interested, they were begging for it. One guy offered $500 if I could ship him one to Boston. Another said his wife was a night shift nurse and needed something exactly like this. A sleep-deprived student from Berlin offered to help with CAD design. It was validating and terrifying. I had nothing real to sell, but I had momentum. I spent the next 3 months working evenings and weekends. I learned how to CNC cut wood, ordered acoustic foam from Alibaba, and got help from a friend's cousin who worked in HVAC to rig a silent ventilation system. The first prototype was a disaster. It trapped heat like a microwave, and the door handle came off the second time I used it. But it worked. When I lay down inside it, I heard nothing. Just my breathing and the soft hum of the fan. I called it the Zen Box. The name was cheesy, I knew, but it got the point across. I made a second, better prototype and started a Kickstarter campaign with a $30 $000 goal. I spent $500 I didn't really have on a short video showing people climbing inside the Zenbox in various noisy settings, next to construction sites, in apartments with crying babies, under fluorescent office lights. I hit the goal in 36 hours. 2 weeks in, the campaign passed $250,000. A month later, I was on a video call with a VC who had backed Casper, and a journalist from Fast Company emailed me asking if they could feature my sleep revolution. That's when things got real. I quit my job. It was terrifying. My parents thought I was having a breakdown. I moved back home to save money and turned our garage into a mini factory. My dad, a retired electrician, helped me design safer wiring for the interior lights. My mom tested every prototype by napping in it and giving blunt reviews like, "Smells weird," or "Too coffin why." In less than a year, we shipped 600 Zenbox units. Most were domestic, but a few went to Canada, Germany, and one to a celebrity who I legally can't name, who allegedly used it on tour buses. But we were drowning in logistics. The units were bulky and expensive to ship. A few arrived damaged. Others had ventilation issues. The worst was when a customer in Arizona reported that her cat got trapped inside while she was at work, and it panicked and shredded the interior. I had to pivot. Version 2.0 of the Zenbox was designed to be DIY. We sold it as a kit, precision-cut panels, a silent fan, detailed assembly instructions, and access to a private customer community. This cut costs by 40%, allowed us to ship globally, and turned out to be a huge hit with hobbyists. Suddenly, people were customizing their Zenboxes, adding RGB lighting, built-in speakers, book nooks. One guy installed a tiny espresso machine inside. It became a subculture. In 2021, I turned down an acquisition offer. $4.2 million. It was tempting, especially since I just dealt with a batch of defective fans that cost us $70,000 in refunds. But I knew we were just getting started. The Zenbox wasn't just a sleep pod. It had become a productivity booth, a therapy retreat, even a meditation studio. We rebranded to Zenmid and leaned into the modular lifestyle angle. We raised a $3 million seed round the following year, hired real engineers, opened a small factory in Ohio, and launched 3 new products: a collapsible sound booth for gamers and streamers, a 2-person couples pod, and a portable nap capsule for offices. By 2023, we were profitable and had 28 employees. Looking back, it's absurd. I started with insomnia and ended up running a company. The irony is, I still don't sleep that well. The stress, the pressure, it's relentless. But I get to build something that actually helps people. I get emails from new parents who say it saved their marriage, or from students who used a Zenbox to study during chaotic dorm parties. One guy even proposed to his girlfriend inside one. I didn't expect to cry reading that, but I did. We're not a unicorn. I don't drive a Lambo. I still rent. But I get up every day and know I made something real, something useful. And in the end, that's better than sleep. Well, almost. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I was just trying not to drown in debt. This all started 3 years ago when I was working a mind-numbing job in a mid-sized insurance firm. I was in data entry. If hell had a form, it would be spreadsheets and a supervisor named Paul who made sure you knew your worth ended when your 30-minute lunch break did. My salary barely paid for rent in the crumbling apartment I shared with 2 other miserable people, and I was staring down $47,000 in student loans. One night, after a particularly brutal 11-hour shift, thanks, Paul, I stopped at a dingy Chinese place on the corner. The kind that looks like it could either poison you or change your life. It did the latter, but not because of the food. I got a fortune cookie. The slip of paper inside read, "Asterisk, you will create something that changes your destiny." Asterisk, normally I'd laugh it off. That night, I pinned it to my fridge with a magnet shaped like a banana. Fast forward a week. I was sitting on my crusty couch, half watching a YouTube video about drop shipping while doom-scrolling Reddit. A post about someone flipping estate sale junk for huge profits caught my eye. Something clicked. I didn't have the cash or space to hoard junk, but I could make things. I used to build wooden toys with my grandpa when I was a kid. He taught me how to sand, cut, and paint tiny pieces of pine into little trucks and animals. That was the last time I'd felt anything close to fulfillment. So I went to the dollar store and bought 10 wooden spoons, a set of acrylic paints, and a hot glue gun. I spent that weekend customizing the spoons with funny faces and hand-painted quotes. I listed them on Etsy as sassy kitchen spirits. I sold one, then 3, then 10. In 2 weeks, I made $312, more than my car payment. My roommates laughed at me. I didn't care. I used every spare second to make spoons. I added seasonal themes, Halloween ghosts, Christmas elves, even a line of passive-aggressive roommate reminder spoons. They blew up on TikTok after a small influencer made a joke about beating bad vibes out of her soup with my "get out of my kitchen, Karen" spoon. That was the beginning of something I didn't see coming. In 4 months, I made over $9,000. I quit my job. Paul told me I was throwing away stability. Maybe I was. But I was finally breathing. I started attending weekend maker fairs, peddling my weird wooden art like some deranged kitchen witch. People loved it. I added cutting boards, spatulas, even a line of customizable utensil holders shaped like cartoon chefs. Everything was handmade, painted, and sealed in my tiny apartment. My roommates hated the paint fumes. I moved out 6 months later. By year 2, I had rented a 600-square-foot workshop and hired my first part-time assistant, Mia, a friend of a friend who'd just been laid off. She was better at social media than I'd ever be, and she tripled our reach in 3 months. Orders exploded. But it wasn't all whimsical faces and quirky quotes. I had a stretch where an international shipment got held in customs and then destroyed because I didn't fill out a form correctly. $4, 200 lost. My card declined the same day I had to pay rent on the workshop. I cried in a Wendy's parking lot, eating cold fries and questioning every decision that brought me there. Still, I kept going. I took a loan from my mom, who I had avoided involving until then, just enough to get through the month. I promised I'd pay it back with interest. She said she didn't care about the money. She was just proud of me. That hit harder than the failure. At the start of year 3, I rebranded everything. New name, Spoonful of Sass. New website, new packaging, new everything. We launched themed subscription boxes, monthly utensil sets with matching kitchen towels, and a handwritten pun from me. They sold out in 3 days. Today, I have 5 employees. A real studio with ventilation and 2 3D printers for our silicone molds. We're in talks with 2 major home goods retailers. Last month, we broke $400K in total sales. But here's the weirdest part. I still paint spoons on Friday nights. I pick one order, grab my brushes, and paint like I did when I was broke and scared and clinging to a plastic fortune. The slip of paper is still pinned to my fridge, now in a much nicer apartment. Every time I see it, I remember the night everything started with a joke product no one thought would sell. I never set out to start a business. I just wanted to stop feeling like my life was slipping through my fingers while I typed someone else's data into a machine that didn't care if I existed. And somehow, by drawing googly eyes on wooden spoons, I built something that saved me. If you're sitting there with an idea that feels stupid, try it. That's the kind that usually works. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never planned on becoming an entrepreneur. Honestly, the idea sounded like a buzzword used by people who sold Instagram courses about getting rich from dropshipping. I was perfectly content being a mid-level software engineer at a large, faceless tech company in Austin. It paid well, I had a dog-friendly office, and there were endless kombucha flavors on tap. That was enough until I got fired. I was let go on a Tuesday. No warning. Just a restructuring email, a 15-minute Zoom call, and 3 months severance. I didn't panic, though. I had savings. I had time. What I didn't have was a plan. That weekend, I met up with my friend Raj. Over tacos and cheap beer, I told him about the layoff. Raj owned a small digital agency and always had some side project cooking. He shrugged and said, "Why don't you try freelancing? At least until you find something permanent." Freelancing sounded like purgatory, but I signed up for Upwork and started bidding on jobs. My first gig paid $80 to fix a broken React form. It took me 30 minutes. Then $200 for a mobile UI fix. The projects kept coming. In 2 months, I was making more than I had at my 9 to 5 job. That's when I got the idea. One night, a client asked me if I could build a basic dashboard for managing their Shopify store. Nothing fancy, just something to visualize sales, track inventory, and automate some email alerts. I threw something together using React and Firebase. It was ugly but functional. A few weeks later, another client asked for something similar. then another. That's when the light bulb moment hit. These weren't tech-savvy founders. They were online store owners, garage tinkerers, and indie crafters trying to manage their stores with spreadsheets and duct tape. They didn't want to learn APIs or Zapier. They wanted buttons that worked. So I pivoted. I took all the one-off scripts I'd written and started combining them into a single tool. I called it Shelf. It was clunky at first. I didn't know the first thing about UI/UX, and I was still juggling freelance gigs to pay rent. But I launched the MVP on Reddit and Indie Hackers. I wrote a long post called, "I Got Fired, Build a Thing, and Now It Pays My Rent." It got traction. People signed up. I charged $15 a month. Within a week, 20 people subscribed. $300 a month wasn't life-changing money, but it was proof. I spent the next 6 months building nonstop. Woke up at 6 a.m., worked on Shelf until 9, then freelanced until dinner. Rinse and repeat. I added more features, mostly based on what people were yelling about in the feedback form. Every time someone said, "This is great," but I treated it like gold. By month 9, I had 200 paying users. I raised prices to $29/month. I stopped freelancing. It felt surreal. I was running a one-man SaaS. Then came the tipping point. A customer emailed me asking if they could add their whole team to the dashboard. They wanted user roles, permissions, notifications, the works. I hesitated. I hadn't planned for multi-user anything, but I built it anyway. And then I realized I wasn't just making a tool anymore. I was building a platform. I hired my first part-time contractor to help with front-end work. I paid him out of my own pocket and prayed the MRR, monthly recurring revenue, wouldn't dip. It didn't. It doubled. Turns out, small teams needed Shelf even more than solo store owners. After a year, I hit $10K MRR. I remember sitting on my porch, just staring at the Stripe dashboard. I refreshed the page 5 times, thinking it was a glitch. I called Raj. "Dude, I think I'm doing it," I said. He laughed. "You're past doing it. You're building something real." That's when things got weird. A VC firm reached out. They'd seen my post on Indie Hackers and wanted to chat. I took the call out of curiosity. They offered $500K for 20% equity. I said no. I didn't want a boss again. Instead, I kept growing. Shelf crossed 1,000 paying customers in year 2. I hired 2 more devs, a support rep, and a part-time designer. I raised prices again to $49/month for new users. I automated almost everything: onboarding, support tickets, usage tracking. I started taking Fridays off. I learned how to cook. I took my first vacation in 4 years. Then the acquisition emails started. At first, it was small firms. Then bigger names. One company offered $2.4 million. I almost said yes. I wrote a draft reply and everything, but I never sent it. I wasn't done. I started seeing Shelf show up in YouTube tutorials, Shopify forums, even competitor landing pages. I got invited to speak at a small SaaS conference. I stood on stage, sweating through my shirt, telling a room full of strangers how I got fired and accidentally became a founder. Someone asked me, "What would you do differently?" I thought about that a lot. The truth? Almost nothing. I didn't start with a vision or a pitch deck. I started with a problem I saw over and over again, and I just tried to solve it. One tiny feature at a time. Today, Shelf makes around $60K MRR. I have a full-time team of 5. We're completely bootstrapped, profitable, and growing. I still work out of my home office. I still answer customer emails sometimes. And I still remember that feeling of getting laid off, thinking I just hit a dead end. Turns out, it was a fork in the road. And I took the weird path. The one with no signs. The one I built as I walked. I started my first real business in a college dorm room, selling what was basically garbage. That's not hyperbole. It was actual garbage, stuff I pulled from the dumpster behind the campus tech building. Old keyboards, monitors with cracked screens, CPUs that wouldn't boot. Most of it looked like it belonged in a museum of mid-2000s office equipment. I was a broke sophomore, majoring in electrical engineering with a minor and surviving on free pizza at student org meetings. The idea hit when my roommate, Mark, came home pissed because his laptop charger broke and the campus bookstore wanted $89 for a new one. I laughed, reached into a drawer where I kept a box of dead chargers I'd found, and within 5 minutes, I Frankensteined together a working one. I had a heat gun, some solder, and just enough recklessness to play with live wires in a dorm room. Mark was stunned. "Dude," he said, "you could sell this." So I did. The first week I posted on our campus forum offering laptop lifesavers, chargers, and repairs. I made $117. In college money, that was like finding gold. I reinvested every penny, not into ads or supplies, but into late-night runs to the e-waste bin behind the engineering building. Over the next month, I realized people would pay not just for repair, but for customization. I painted an old Dell keyboard in neon green for a guy in the dorm across the hall. Someone else wanted their trackpad upgraded, which required replacing a chip I barely understood, but I figured it out. I wasn't just selling fixed gear, I was selling fixed gear with personality. By junior year, I had 2 guys working with me part-time. We weren't registered as a company. We just operated under the name Dorm Tech. Everything was word of mouth and cash only. I paid my team in pizza and $20 bills. Our office was still my side of the room, lined with boxes of tangled cables and motherboards stacked like bricks. Then we hit the jackpot. One of our regulars was a TA in the computer science department. He mentioned that the department was tossing out 60 old desktop towers because they'd received a grant to replace them. I asked if we could take them off their hands. He said yes, if we hauled them out by the end of the week. We borrowed a friend's pickup and made 6 trips in 3 days. I still remember the stares we got, 2 sweaty undergrads lugging beige computer towers across campus like we were stealing the past. Back at the dorm, we opened them up, cleaned them out, and built 40 working machines. We installed Linux, loaded them with open-source software, and branded them as starter PCs for first years. We sold every single one during freshman orientation week at $120 each. Most cost us nothing but time. That was the moment I realized this could be real. The next semester, I officially registered Dorm Tech as an LLC. We moved operations to a tiny off-campus office. It was 300 square feet of peeling carpet, but it felt like Google to us. We added a website, opened Venmo and PayPal accounts, and started getting orders from students at other universities. By senior year, we were making just under $6,000 a month in profit. My parents, who once begged me to focus on real internships, changed their tune when I paid off a semester's tuition in cash. But growth came with pain. One of my co-founders got too ambitious and tried to branch off into drone repairs without telling us. Another got overwhelmed with finals and ghosted during our busiest season. I was pulling 14-hour days, fixing laptops, shipping rebuilt desktops, and trying to graduate. Then came the audit. Turns out, we had failed to collect sales tax correctly on over $30,000 in sales. I'll never forget the day I got the letter. I thought it was a prank. It wasn't. We ended up paying most of it out of pocket, and I had to borrow $4,000 from my older sister, who ran a bakery and was way more financially literate than I was. It was humbling. I sat in her shop one night, drinking burnt coffee, explaining how I screwed up. She didn't say, "I told you so." She said, "Next time, ask before you file taxes blind." Lesson learned. After graduation, I had 2 choices: take a job offer from a big tech firm or go full-time with Dorm Tech. I chose the second. My parents freaked. My girlfriend, now wife, was cautiously supportive. I rebranded as Loop Tech and started focusing on scalable services, bulk refurbishing, recycling programs, custom hardware for nonprofits. I partnered with local schools to replace their aging labs on a budget. We grew slow but steady. By year 4, we hit $250K in revenue. I hired my first real employees. Real desks, real paychecks, real health insurance. We got featured in a local business magazine as the startup that turned trash into tech. Then COVID hit. It almost killed us. Schools closed. Budgets froze. Clients vanished. I had to furlough half my team. I took no salary for 4 months. I considered walking away. But something weird happened. People stuck at home started digging out their old tech. I started getting flooded with emails. "Can you fix my old iMac? Can you upgrade my PC for Zoom?" We pivoted fast. I ran YouTube tutorials on DIY repair, sold cheap upgrade kits, and shipped out Revive Your Rig boxes with guides and tools. It exploded. We made more in 6 months than we had the entire previous year. Today, Loop Tech employs 18 people. We have 2 warehouses, serve 40-plus schools across 3 states, and run a program teaching students how to refurbish and donate machines to underserved communities. Last year, we cleared $1.1 million in revenue. And yes, I still keep one of those beige desktops from the dumpster in my office. It reminds me where this all started, behind a tech building, under a cloud of dead electronics, with a busted laptop charger and a half-baked idea. People always ask what my secret was. I say, learn to fix what's broken, especially if nobody else wants to. That's where the real gold is. When I was 24, I was unemployed, living in a moldy basement apartment, and microwaving the same packet of ramen for the third night in a row. That night, my roommate, an old high school friend who'd moved in after his girlfriend kicked him out, looked at me and said, "Man, we have to figure something out." That was the start of everything. We didn't have a garage to start a company in, like the stories you hear about Bezos or Jobs. We had a rusty kitchen table and a Wi-Fi connection that barely reached our basement. I had a business degree with zero relevant experience, and he dropped out of community college 3 times. But we both had time, desperation, and a stupid idea: sell custom sneaker cleaning kits. My friend was obsessed with sneakers. He cleaned his Jordans with a toothbrush every Saturday. He ranted constantly about how bad the current cleaning products were, how they either didn't work or ruined the leather. One night, probably stoned, he said, "What if we made one that didn't suck?" I laughed, then paused, then said, "Okay, but what would make it not suck?" That led to 2 months of reading up on shoe materials, detergents, and packaging. We bought ingredients from shady suppliers on Alibaba and used old measuring cups to mix things in our bathroom sink. Our first product was literally a plastic sandwich bag with a bottle of our homemade cleaner, a microfiber towel we got in bulk off Amazon, and a tiny brush we found at a dollar store. We named it Sneak Savior. The branding was a joke, but the cleaner actually worked. Our first sales came from Reddit. We posted a before and after photo on our /sneakers, fully expecting to get roasted. Instead, people messaged us asking how to buy it. We didn't have a website. We didn't even have a PayPal account. The first 10 kits we sold, we delivered in person around our city, using my roommate's 1998 Civic with one working speaker. Eventually, we scraped together $300 to build a basic Shopify store. The next month, we made $900. Then $300. Then it dipped to $700, and we freaked out. We didn't understand marketing. We thought posted on Reddit was a long-term strategy. So I started watching YouTube videos about Facebook ads while my friend kept refining the cleaner. He found a supplier in Toronto who was willing to mix a more stable formula for us, minimum order 200 units. We begged our parents for loans. My mom gave me $1,000 under the condition that I never talk about this shoe thing again if it failed. We used it to buy 200 bottles, printed labels at a UPS store, and redesigned our packaging using Canva. We even made a logo, a haloed sneaker, with the help of a Fiverr artist in Indonesia. It still looked cheap, but it was something. Sales jumped again. We started getting Instagram DMs from people asking if they could resell our kits at their sneaker shops. One dude in Philly ordered 50 to stock in his store. He called us 3 weeks later asking for more. That was the moment I thought, this might actually become real. But then came the copycats. One morning we woke up to a TikTok of a cleaner that looked suspiciously like ours. Same ingredients, same packaging color scheme, different name. They had a huge influencer budget. We were cooked. Our sales tanked. We started fighting. My friend wanted to confront them publicly, but I didn't want to burn bridges. For a month we barely spoke. We each thought the other had ruined it. Then I got an idea. What if we leaned into being the underdog? We rebranded again, this time calling ourselves the Basement Lab. We told our story on TikTok, 2 broke guys in a moldy apartment trying to make a better shoe cleaner. We showed behind-the-scenes footage of mixing formulas, packing kits by hand, making deliveries. It felt risky, raw, but people started to root for us. Sales started ticking back up. Then one of our TikToks blew up. 2.1 million views in 2 days. A guy stitched it, saying he'd tried it and it worked better than the big brands. That week we made $18,000 in sales. We had to spend 3 nights in a row packing boxes until 3 a.m. I'll never forget sitting on the floor surrounded by shipping labels and bubble wrap, drinking instant coffee and thinking, so this is what a startup feels like. We moved into a small co-working space, our lab, hired our first part-time employee, then another. My roommate, now co-founder, was managing product development full-time. I handled marketing and customer service. We weren't rich, but we were finally able to pay ourselves $2,000 a month, enough to move out of the basement. Fast forward 2 years, we've sold over 120,000 units. We're in 300-plus sneaker shops and boutiques. We partnered with a nonprofit to donate cleaning kits to homeless shelters. We even did a limited collab with a streetwear brand that sold out in 11 minutes. And yeah, our competitors still exist, but we don't care anymore. Because now we have something they can't replicate, our story. People still message us saying they started cleaning their shoes differently because of us. One guy told us his teenage son started his own sneaker reselling side hustle after watching our videos. That kind of stuff still blows me away. I'm 28 now. We just hired a CEO so we can focus on new products. The business is profitable. We're thinking about expanding into apparel care next. My mom now brags about me to her book club. And the funny part? I still clean my shoes with a toothbrush sometimes. Just to remember where it all started. We weren't the smartest. We weren't the best funded. But we kept going when it got stupidly hard. Sometimes that's enough. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I was the kind of guy who followed the rules, punched in at 9, punched out at 5, and spent weekends trying to forget that Monday was always around the corner. My name is Jason, and 2 years ago, I was a mid-level analyst at a decently sized logistics company in Cleveland. I had health insurance, a 401k, and a boss who microwaved tuna at 11:45 every damn day. Life was fine. Predictable. Until I got fired. They said corporate restructuring. I was 34. Not young enough to shrug it off. Not old enough to call it early retirement. I had just signed a lease on a slightly too expensive apartment and was dating someone who, I later found out, saw stability as my only redeeming quality. So I sat at my kitchen table one morning, 3 weeks into unemployment, eating cold leftover pasta and scrolling job listings I didn't want. I had an idea that I kept pushing away. And like most ideas, it kept coming back. Before logistics, I worked part-time through college delivering food for a local diner. I loved that job. The diner was nothing fancy, but the owner, Marty, ran a tight ship. He used an old flip phone, took orders by hand, and somehow made deliveries work with 3 drivers and 0 technology. He always joked that he was a paper and napkin CEO. I visited him after I got laid off, and the place hadn't changed. Still no website, still cash only. What if I helped you digitize everything? I asked. Online orders, driver tracking, scheduling, the works. He chuckled. I can barely unlock my phone, Jason. But he let me try. I built him a basic site using free tools. Square for payments. Google Sheets for orders. Zapier to send texts to drivers. It was duct tape tech, but it worked. Orders increased by 40% in the first month. Customers loved not having to call in. Marty gave me a free burger and said, "You might be onto something." And so began the rabbit hole. I realized small, family-run restaurants were everywhere, still clinging to paper menus and dial-up phones. They weren't Luddites, they were just overwhelmed. The big platforms like Uber Eats or DoorDash took monstrous cuts, upwards of 30%, and left them with crumbs. What they needed wasn't more exposure, they needed control. I called my idea Simple Serve. A toolkit for local restaurants to modernize just enough. Not an App Store monstrosity, not a full PS overhaul. Just a modular system that gave them online ordering, delivery logistics, and a customer dashboard, all managed by them. Flat monthly fee. No commissions. To get started, I sold my TV and my PS5, took a freelance gig writing code at night, and built the first version in 3 months. My girlfriend left somewhere in the middle of that. Said I had found a new mistress. She wasn't entirely wrong. My first clients were diners, taco trucks, family pizzerias. I biked to meetings, printed my own flyers, demoed the product on a Chromebook I bought used off Craigslist. I priced it dirt cheap, $99/month, and let them cancel anytime. Out of the first 30 places I pitched, 5 signed up. It was enough to keep the lights on. Then something wild happened. A tiny Korean barbecue spot in Columbus using my system had a TikTok go viral. Overnight, they were getting 200 orders a day, and the system held up. The owner gave me a shout-out in a follow-up video. Within a week, I had 300 emails from other restaurant owners. I wasn't ready. I didn't even have a proper business bank account. I scrambled to scale. I begged a friend from college, Mark, to quit his job and help. He laughed, then agreed after I showed him a month's revenue, $12,000, and growing fast. He moved into my apartment. We turned the living room into HQ and bought a whiteboard that barely fit through the door. We slept 4 hours a night. Support emails flooded in. Bugs exploded. But we grew. Word of mouth was our rocket fuel. No ads. No PR. Just owners telling other owners, this works and it doesn't screw you. Within a year, we had 1,200 paying clients across 28 states. We hired 4 people, all from within our early user base. A server admin who used to run a bakery. A UX designer who worked nights as a bartender. It wasn't just a startup, it was a rebellion against the giants siphoning every last penny from mom-and-pop shops. But then came the fork in the road. A VC firm reached out. I won't name them, but they backed some big names in food tech. They offered $2 million for 30% equity. It was flattering. Mark was excited. I was tempted. But I couldn't shake the feeling that their end goal would be acquisition by a big delivery company. Which meant, eventually, fees. Lock-ins. Upselling. Everything we stood against. I said no. We nearly went broke a month later. Growth plateaued. We had server outages. A new PS software competitor started cold calling our clients. I panicked. I cried. I applied for a job at an insurance firm just to hedge. And then, salvation arrived in the form of a 63-year-old Greek grandmother named Eleni. She ran a small Euro shop in Florida and was one of our first users. She emailed me one night with subject line idea. Inside, she described how she was using our system not just for orders, but to run online cooking classes, schedule community events, and even create a loyalty program by exporting CSVs and using MailChimp. I read it twice. Then called Mark and said, we've been thinking too small. We pivoted slightly, turned SimpleServe from a restaurant-only platform into a neighborhood commerce toolkit. Suddenly, bakeries used it to sell custom cakes. Butchers used it to schedule pickups. Yoga studios booked classes through it. We became less of a food tech company and more of a local economy enabler. Today, we're still small. 18 employees. 4,300 clients. No investors. Profitable. We build slowly, release only when ready, and stay close to the people we serve. We still get emails from owners saying, I finally took a weekend off. That means more than any IPO. I didn't mean to become an entrepreneur. I just hated seeing good people lose to bad systems. So here I am, running a company from a room that used to be my bedroom, now filled with wires and coffee mugs and a whiteboard that still has "Don't Sell Out" written across the top in fading red ink. Some days, I miss having a boss. Most days, I don't. This story starts a few years ago when I was stuck in a dead-end job, barely making enough to cover rent and my student loans. I had this idea that I could be doing so much more, but every time I thought about trying something new, the fear of failure paralyzed me. I had the typical thoughts like, what if it doesn't work out? What if I lose everything? The idea of jumping into something risky seemed terrifying, so I stayed in my comfort zone, slowly becoming more miserable by the day. Then came the day that changed everything. It was just another regular Wednesday at the office, and my boss came in and told us that they were restructuring. My heart sank. I had been at this company for almost 5 years, working my way up from a junior role to a mid-level manager. My job was stable. At least, it seemed stable at the time. My boss told us that a lot of positions were being cut, and I immediately started thinking about how vulnerable I was. That day, I went home and started to think about everything. What I really wanted from my career and my life, and why I felt so stuck. I realized that deep down, I had always wanted to start my own business. I'd dabbled in small projects before, but nothing serious. A few failed attempts, a couple of half-baked ideas, but nothing that had ever really stuck. But I was tired of waiting for permission to live the life I wanted. So, I decided that if I was going to take a risk, this was the time. I spent the next few months researching different business ideas, but I quickly realized that it wasn't just about finding something I could sell. I had to find something that I was genuinely passionate about. I knew I wasn't going to build a successful business if I didn't truly care about the problem I was solving. After a lot of brainstorming, I decided to focus on e-commerce. The idea of selling products online seemed like a manageable way to get started, and there were so many niches I could tap into. But it wasn't going to be easy. I had zero experience in the e-commerce space. The first thing I did was dive into learning about digital marketing, SEO, paid ads, social media strategies. I spent countless hours reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and joining online communities where I could pick the brains of people who had already done it. There was so much information to absorb, and honestly, it felt overwhelming at times, but I knew that I couldn't afford to give up. Around the same time, I started getting more serious about building my brand. I needed to figure out what made my product unique and how I could stand out in a crowded market. After a lot of trial and error, I decided to focus on eco-friendly products. Sustainability was becoming more and more important to people, and I figured that if I could offer products that were not only useful but also help the planet, I would have a chance at building something meaningful. I launched my first website on a shoestring budget, using a free Shopify trial. The design was simple, nothing flashy, but it worked. I spent a few $100s on a Facebook ad campaign to test the waters, and to my surprise, it actually worked. People started buying. I was ecstatic. It wasn't a huge amount of sales, but it was a start. I felt this rush of excitement, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I could see the potential. However, the excitement quickly faded as reality set in. I had no idea what I was doing. My first orders came in, and I was clueless about how to handle fulfillment, shipping, and customer service. I had no systems in place. I was trying to do everything manually, processing orders, replying to customer emails, tracking inventory. It quickly became clear that this was a huge mess. My small e-commerce business was taking up all my time, and I wasn't even sure if I was making any profit. I realized that if I was going to scale, I needed to bring in help. I hired a part-time virtual assistant to handle customer service emails and work on some of the day-to-day tasks. This gave me more time to focus on growth. But I still had no real systems in place. Everything felt chaotic, and there were moments where I thought about quitting. But I kept going, learning from my mistakes, and making incremental improvements. As the months went by, I started refining my marketing strategy. I put more money into paid ads, optimized my website for conversions, and began to build an email list. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. I had my first month where I made over $10,000 in sales. It wasn't much compared to big players in the industry, but for me, it was a huge win. It was proof that I was on the right track. I reinvested every penny back into the business, and I started scaling up. I expanded my product range, improved my website, and worked on building partnerships with other eco-friendly brands. The growth was slow but steady, and I felt like I was finally gaining momentum. One of the biggest turning points came when I realized I could leverage social media to build a community around my brand. I started creating content on Instagram and TikTok, focusing on eco-friendly living tips, product reviews, and sustainability challenges. My followers started to grow, and with that, my customer base grew too. People didn't just buy from me. They became part of a community that cared about the same values. With this newfound attention, I was able to secure partnerships with influencers who shared my brand's values. That's when things really took off. Within 6 months, my revenue doubled. I was finally able to quit my job and work on my business full-time. I couldn't believe it. The risk I took a year ago was starting to pay off. Today, my business is a multi-six-figure company. It hasn't been easy. There have been setbacks, moments of doubt, and plenty of late nights. But every failure has taught me something. Every obstacle has made me better. I'm now in the position where I can hire a team to help me grow even further. I'm more confident than ever in my ability to build a brand that not only makes money, but also makes a difference. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that you can't wait for the perfect moment to start. You have to take action, even when you don't have all the answers. Success doesn't happen overnight, and it's not without its challenges, but if you're willing to learn and adapt, it's possible. I look back on that day when I was sitting in my office, feeling like my life was falling apart, and I can't help but feel grateful for the turn of events. If I had stayed comfortable, if I had continued to let fear hold me back, I wouldn't be where I am today. Sometimes, the hardest moments in life are the ones that lead to the greatest transformations. This is a story of how I went from a broke college dropout to building a 7-figure business in less than 4 years. It all started in the fall of 2018. I was 22, dropped out of college, and honestly had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't one of those people who had it all figured out. I was confused, disoriented, and honestly, a little scared of my future. I had no job prospects and no real skills to speak of. My friends were all about to graduate and starting to land decent jobs, while I was still trying to figure out what to do with my life. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always had this itch to start something, but I had no clue how to start. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were both teachers, and they expected me to finish school and get a safe job. The pressure was always there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't meant for a traditional career. One night, after a long conversation with my best friend, I decided to take the leap. I didn't have much money, but I figured I could figure something out. I remember sitting in my tiny, cluttered room at my parents' house, browsing through YouTube videos of people talking about starting online businesses. I watched hours of content on dropshipping, affiliate marketing, and digital products. It was overwhelming, but there was one video that clicked with me. It was a guy talking about how he started a successful e-commerce business selling a niche product. The idea stuck with me. I could sell something online too. It didn't have to be complicated or fancy, but it could be a way for me to make money while working from home. I started researching products. I spent the next few weeks glued to my computer, trying to figure out what would sell. I knew I didn't have a lot of capital, so I needed something that didn't require a huge investment upfront. After a lot of trial and error, I settled on selling phone accessories. It wasn't the most glamorous or unique niche, but it was something I could get started with quickly. I set up a Shopify store, learned how to design simple, eye-catching product pages, and started running Facebook ads. The first few weeks were brutal. I was working around the clock, staying up late to tweak ads, trying to figure out how to make the store look more professional. And for the first month, I had no sales. It was crushing. I would check my store every day, hoping to see that first order come through, but nothing happened. I almost gave up several times. My parents kept asking me if I was sure I wanted to keep going, but I couldn't stop. I knew that if I quit now, I'd never get anywhere. Then, on the 31st day, it happened. I woke up to a notification on my phone. You have a new order. It was a $25 phone case. I stared at my phone for a minute, trying to process it. I had made a sale. I didn't know if it was a fluke or if it was the beginning of something real, but I was ecstatic. From there, I doubled down. I reinvested every penny I made into improving my store and scaling my ads. I fine-tuned my marketing, learned more about social media, and focused on building relationships with customers. Slowly but surely, sales started to pick up. The more I learned, the more I applied. By the end of the third month, I was consistently making around $200 a day in sales. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to get me excited. However, I quickly realized that running ads wasn't enough. The real key to success was building a brand. I spent the next few months working on branding, customer experience, and trying to find ways to offer more value. It wasn't just about selling products, it was about creating a community around my business. I started to engage with my customers more, responding to their messages, offering discounts to repeat buyers, and creating content on Instagram to show how my products could make their lives easier. I also began to experiment with email marketing, which had a huge impact on my business. Through email campaigns, I was able to reach past customers and offer them new products, promotions, and value-added content. Fast forward a year, and I had turned my small e-commerce side hustle into a full-fledged business. I was making around $10,000 a month in sales. I had hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service, and I had a few people working on content creation for social media. The best part? I was able to quit my part-time job and focus on my business full-time. But I wasn't done yet. I kept pushing myself to grow, learning from my mistakes, and investing in my business. I started to diversify my product range, introducing higher quality, premium items that would appeal to a more discerning customer. I also began experimenting with different advertising strategies, including influencer marketing and YouTube ads. By the end of 2020, I had crossed the six-figure mark in annual revenue. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was happening. I couldn't believe how far I had come. I had learned more in 2 years than I had in my entire life. Then came 2021. I had been scaling consistently for over 2 years, but something shifted. I hit a plateau. My sales were stable, but growth had slowed down. I started to panic. I had to figure out how to get past this hump. I spent weeks analyzing my business, looking for new opportunities, trying to figure out what was holding me back. That's when I made a big decision. I decided to pivot into a new market. I had been working primarily in the phone accessories niche, but I realized I had built a strong foundation and an audience that trusted me. I used the knowledge I had gained and the customer relationships I had developed to launch a new product line, this time in the home goods niche. It was a risk, but it paid off. Within 6 months, I had launched my new product line, and sales exploded. I went from making $20,000 a month to over $100,000 000. By the end of 2021, I was officially a seven-figure business owner. Looking back on my journey, I realize how much I've learned. It hasn't been an easy ride, but the lessons I've learned along the way have been invaluable. I've had to navigate rejection, failure, and doubt, but I kept going because I knew I had a bigger vision. Now, I get messages every day from people asking how I did it, how I built my business from scratch. The truth is, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. But I can tell you this, if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. If I can do it, so can you. And here's the best part, I'm just getting started. The future is bright, and I can't wait to see what comes next. I had always been the kind of person who loved solving problems, but never had a clear direction for my life. I graduated college at 22 with a degree in marketing, but no real clue about what I wanted to do next. I wasn't the kind of person who could just go work in an office 9 to 5 and be happy. I tried a few jobs, each one more uninspiring than the last, until I ended up working as a barista in a local coffee shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the only job I could find that let me work at night, so I could try to figure things out during the day. I spent hours browsing online, reading about entrepreneurship, business, startups, and the tech world. Then one day, it hit me. People spend so much money on coffee every day, but no one really talks about how many of those people are constantly drinking mediocre coffee. And that's when I got the idea, what if I could create a better coffee experience for people who didn't want to spend $5 every day at Starbucks, but still wanted that premium taste? What if I could sell an at-home coffee solution that made the experience better for everyone? It wasn't the most original idea, but it felt right. I had no business plan, no investors, no connections. All I had was a cheap laptop and a ton of free time. So, I did what any half-crazy, broke 25-year-old would do. I borrowed $500 from my parents to buy some coffee beans, a grinder, and a basic coffee maker. I spent the next 2 months experimenting with different beans, grind sizes, and brewing methods. I researched how to improve the flavor profiles of coffee and tested hundreds of combinations. It wasn't until I had an old friend from college come over and try my coffee that I realized I was onto something. She took a sip, looked at me, and said, "This is amazing." That was the first time someone had given me feedback like that. And it got me thinking, what if I could sell this? But I had no clue how to turn a coffee passion into a business. I didn't even know where to begin. I didn't have a website, I didn't have a product to sell, and I had zero connections in the coffee industry. But that didn't stop me. I started small. I bought a domain name, built a very basic website using Squarespace, and branded it with the name Brewcraft. The plan was simple. I'd sell high-quality, freshly roasted beans that people could order online and brew themselves at home. I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. I just wanted to bring a better, more consistent coffee experience to people who were tired of the same old thing. I used social media to promote the idea, posting pictures of the beans, the brewing process, and the perfect cup of coffee I'd managed to make. I used Instagram as my main platform to engage with people. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The first few months were brutal. I got 0 sales at first. It was discouraging. My friends were supportive, but they weren't exactly buying anything. I had to keep reminding myself, don't quit. Just keep going. After months of barely scraping by, things began to shift. I got a message from a small local cafe that asked if I could supply them with fresh beans. They had heard about my brand on Instagram and wanted to see if we could work together. I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that message. A cafe? I jumped at the opportunity. I didn't even have a real roaster at the time, so I started roasting the beans in my kitchen using a small machine I bought off eBay. I bagged them by hand, printed out labels on my home printer, and personally delivered them to the cafe in my beat-up car. The owner was happy with the beans, and they started selling them as part of their menu. That was the turning point for Brewcraft. As more local cafes started to reach out, I realized I couldn't keep up with just small batch roasting at home. So, I made the decision to invest in a larger roaster. It wasn't cheap, and I had to take out a small business loan to get it. The moment I pressed the button to confirm the purchase, I felt a mix of excitement and terror. This was real now, and the following year, I managed to scale up. I found a small production facility where I could roast the beans professionally. I hired 2 employees to help with packaging and deliveries, and we even started offering subscription services for customers who wanted their coffee delivered every month. Sales started to grow steadily, And I even received my first major order from a regional grocery store chain that wanted to carry Brewcraft on their shelves. The orders kept coming in, and for the first time, I could see the fruits of all my labor. But the road wasn't all smooth. There were plenty of setbacks. I got caught up in inventory issues during the holiday season. I had to deal with a botched batch of beans that caused complaints from customers, and I nearly ran out of cash a few times when expenses started piling up. I spent every waking moment either working or thinking about the business, constantly tinkering with our offerings and trying to improve the customer experience. At one point, I even considered quitting, but every time I thought about walking away, I reminded myself, I've come too far to give up now. Fast forward to today, and Brewcraft is a well-established brand in the specialty coffee space. We're available in over 500 retail locations, including a number of high-end supermarkets and cafes across the country. Our website gets hundreds of orders a day, and we've grown a loyal community of coffee enthusiasts who follow us on social media, share their coffee experiences, and help spread the word. We've also launched a line of coffee-related accessories, including grinders, filters, and mugs, everything a person needs to craft the perfect cup at home. Our subscription service has grown to thousands of active customers, and we're now in talks with several large distributors to expand further. I even sold a small percentage of the business to an investor for the first time, which allowed us to expand into international markets. But the most rewarding part of all of this is seeing how much people appreciate what we're doing. We get messages every week from people telling us how Brewcraft has changed their daily routines, how they now look forward to their morning coffee more than ever. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From a barista with no direction, to a small business owner running a company that's made a real impact. I'm proud of what we've built, and I know that without the constant hustle, the failed attempts, and the sleepless nights, none of it would have been possible. Sometimes, all you need is an idea, a little bit of courage, and the willingness to push through the hard times. The journey isn't over, but it's been one heck of a ride. This is a story of how I went from a broke, college dropout to running a successful online business. It's a tale of struggle, persistence, and everything in between. I hope it resonates with anyone out there who's just starting out or feels like they're stuck in a cycle of failure. If anything, I hope it proves that anyone can make it if they keep pushing. Let's rewind a bit. My name's James, and I grew up in a small town. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't exactly wealthy either. My parents worked hard to provide for us, and I always had everything I needed, but I knew that money was always tight. I learned early on that nothing comes for free. That mentality stuck with me through my entire life. After high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, so I enrolled in college. I figured I would major in something broad like business, but deep down, I wasn't passionate about it. I was there because it felt like the right thing to do. Halfway through my second semester, I realized I hated everything about college, the long lectures, the rigid structure, and the sheer monotony of it all. I wasn't learning anything that excited me, and worst of all, I was drowning in debt. I wasn't sure what my next move was, but I knew I had to leave. Dropping out wasn't an easy decision. My parents weren't thrilled about it. They thought I was throwing away my future, but I couldn't stay in a place that didn't align with my vision of what I wanted in life. I needed something more, something that could give me the freedom I was craving. I wanted to build something of my own, but I didn't know what it would be. At first, I had no idea what to do. I took up odd jobs to pay the bills, and I spent most of my free time reading books and watching online videos about entrepreneurship. I was hungry for knowledge. I stumbled across a YouTube channel where this guy explained how he made his first $1,000 online by selling digital products. I'd always heard about people making money online, but I never really understood how it worked. This guy made it seem so simple. He created a small ebook and sold it on his website. I was intrigued, so I researched digital products, ebooks, courses, printables, and started brainstorming what I could create. One thing I was really good at was graphic design. I taught myself Photoshop and Illustrator in high school as a hobby, and I'd always loved creating designs. It clicked. Why not combine my design skills with the world of digital products? The next few weeks were a blur of excitement and frustration. I created my first set of printable planners and uploaded them to Etsy. I didn't expect much, but at least it was a start. The first month was brutal. I made exactly $12.50. It wasn't even enough to cover the cost of the materials I bought to make the planners. I felt like a failure, but I kept going. I refined my designs, learned more about marketing, and read everything I could about search engine optimization, SEO, and how to promote my products. I applied these lessons, and within a couple of months, my Etsy shop started gaining traction. Slowly but surely, I went from making $12.50 a month to $100, then $500, and eventually $1,000 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to pay the bills and give me a sense of accomplishment. By the end of the first year, I had expanded my product line and built a small email list of loyal customers. I realized that digital products were just the beginning, and I wanted to do more. So I launched my own website. This was a huge step for me, an entirely new venture that I had no experience in, but I was determined to make it work. The website was a disaster at first. The design was clunky, the user experience was terrible, and I had no idea how to drive traffic to it. It felt like every time I took one step forward, I was taking 2 steps back. But I didn't give up. I invested in a paid course on digital marketing, spent countless hours researching, and started improving my website one small tweak at a time. Slowly, traffic started to increase. I also began creating courses, how-to guides on graphic design, Photoshop tutorials, and even marketing strategies. I was terrified that no one would buy them, but to my surprise, people started to sign up. It wasn't instant success, but it was progress. The more I pushed, the more the business grew. I eventually hired a part-time assistant to help with customer service and administration, and I was able to focus more on creating new products. However, as the business grew, so did the challenges. The more money I made, the more responsibilities I had. There were taxes, legal documents, inventory management, and customer service issues. At times, I felt completely overwhelmed, and I questioned whether it was worth it. I considered quitting multiple times. But every time I thought about throwing in the towel, I reminded myself how far I'd come. I had built this from nothing, and I couldn't just let it all go. In my 3rd year, I hit a milestone. My business was generating enough revenue for me to quit the odd jobs I had been doing and focus on it full-time. It felt like a dream. I could wake up whenever I wanted, work on projects I cared about, and most importantly, I had financial independence. But even with this newfound freedom, there were still setbacks. Some products didn't sell, a marketing strategy failed, and I lost some customers due to poor communication. But I kept going, learning from my mistakes, and tweaking my approach. It wasn't until my 5th year in business that I reached a level of comfort where I felt like I'd made it. I had a solid team behind me, recurring customers, and multiple revenue streams. My income was stable, and I had the freedom to choose how I spent my time. I had finally reached a place where I was no longer stressing about money or whether my business would survive. It was now a well-oiled machine that kept running on its own. Reflecting on my journey, I can't help but marvel at how far I've come. There were days when I thought I would never make it, times when I questioned my decisions, and moments when I wanted to quit. But those were the moments that taught me the most. I learned that success is not a straight line. It's full of detours, setbacks, and failures. But it's those challenges that build resilience, and it's that resilience that eventually leads to success. I'm not saying I have all the answers or that the journey is easy. There were days I wanted to give up, but I kept pushing because I believed in what I was building. I hope this story serves as a reminder to anyone out there that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a long, hard journey, but with persistence and hard work, anything is possible. So if you're sitting there wondering if it's worth it, let me tell you, yes, it is. Keep going. The road may be tough, but the destination is worth it. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.